Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from this week's Falmouth Enterprise, dated today, Friday, November 7th of 2025. And that date's important because we'll repeat this reading through Tuesday of next week as part of our schedule of local programming. Many of our listeners enjoy hearing the broadcast on the day of publication, which is Friday, so the weather forecast is relevant. This afternoon, there will be increasing clouds. At night, there'll be rain. The high will be 59 with a low around 52. Tomorrow during the day, it'll be partly sunny, rain likely, a high around 60. At night on Saturday, partly cloudy with a low around 49. The extended forecast for Sunday calls for mostly cloudy with rain likely during the day and cloudy with rain likely at night. The high will be 60 with a low of 47. Some housekeeping. Trash pickup is delayed. Town Hall will be closed and trash and recycling will not be collected on Tuesday in observance of Veterans Day. All residents should place their trash and recycling bins at the curb one day after their usual collection day. And also, a Veterans Day ceremony is set for November 11th. Falmouth's 2025 annual Veterans Day ceremony will take place on Tuesday, November 11th at 11 a.m. at the Falmouth Street Public Library Lawn, Memorial Lane at 300 Main Street. All are invited to honor the men and women who have served the country. Participants include keynote speaker Wayne Suarez, the Reverend Nell Fields of Wacoit Congregational Church, local dignitaries, honor guards from the U.S. Coast Guard, the Falmouth Police Department, the Falmouth Fire Rescue, Elks Lodge 2380 and Scouting, the Highland Light Scottish Pipe Band, and the Falmouth High School Repertory Singers. Refreshments and light fare to follow, hosted by the Falmouth Elks Lodge at 140 Palmer Ave, and sponsored by the Falmouth chapter of the Disabled American Veterans. Looking at what meetings take place next week, the Health Board meets Monday at 5:30 p.m. in the Town Hall. The Veterans Council will meet Wednesday at 4 p.m. in the library. The Water Quality Management Committee will meet Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. in the Town Hall. The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee will meet Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. in the library. The Conservation Commission will meet Wednesday at 7 p.m. via Zoom. The Recreation Committee, Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the Gus Canty Community Center. The Affordable Housing Committee, Thursday at 4 p.m. at the Town Hall. And the Select Board will meet Thursday at 5 p.m. at the Town Hall. And normally when there is a Select Board meeting, the agenda is published in the Friday Falmouth Enterprise, but unfortunately I have gone through the paper 3 times looking for an agenda, and there isn't one. The Select Board's also meeting at an odd time, Thursday, instead of its normal Monday. That may be due to the Veterans Day holiday. But there is no agenda to read to you, or I would. The headline above the fold, if there was such a thing in a digital newspaper, Missed Permit Deadline Costs Town Its Safe Harbor Status, by Katie Nelson. The town has lost its temporary safe harbor status after a developer challenged the designation, prompting state housing officials to rule that Falmouth no longer meets the threshold for protection under the state's Chapter 40B. The loss stems from delays in pulling building permits for the Easterly, a 300-unit affordable housing project planned for 375 Sandwich Road. With 10% of the town's housing stock, counting the Easterly units listed on the town's subsidized housing inventory known as SHI, and a Certified Housing Production Plan, HPP, in hand, Falmouth was granted safe harbor status by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, the EOHLC, on July 29th of 2024. The designation was conditional, and it was set to last until July 28th of 2026. Safe harbor status gave the town greater control over high-density and non-conforming development by limiting developers' ability to override local zoning through Chapter 40B. Losing that protection means zoning boards now have less leverage to deny or condition 40B projects. The issue began when the Easterly's developers failed to obtain building permits within a year of receiving a comprehensive permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. An appeal filed by the Easterly's developers on August 8th of 2024, challenging the ZBA's decision and its 91 conditions, delayed the start of construction. The developers entered mediation with the town and reached an agreement on April 10th of 2025 with a modified permit filed the following day. That process, however, prevented building permits from being issued within the required one-year window. When that deadline passed, the project's units dropped off the SHI, putting the town's safe harbor status in question. The potential lapse in safe harbor first came to light at an October 9th ZBA meeting when William R. Cumming, representing another affordable housing proposal on Sandwich Road, Smithfield Farm Village, alleged that the town's status had already expired in July. The issue became official only after an attorney for a separate 36-unit project, also planned on the former Smithfield Farm property, formally challenged the town's safe harbor claim with the EOHLC. The agency determined that Falmouth no longer qualified because the Easterly units couldn't be counted toward the 10% threshold. The board has not met its burden, the EOHLC decision stated. Director of Community Development Jebediah Jed Cornock informed the Planning Board at its meeting on Tuesday, November 4th. Board member James E. Fox initiated the discussion by asking about the town's safe harbor status. Board member Charlotte A. Harris asked whether the town could regain the designation soon, but Cornock declined to comment on future plans. Assistant Town Planner Melinda Tondera clarified that the loss of safe harbor does not invalidate the town's housing production plan, which remains certified through 2029. Both projects on the former Smithfield Farm property, one for 50 homes for residents aged 55 and older, the other for 36 rental units, are seeking comprehensive permits under Chapter 40B, and their hearings before the Zoning Board are scheduled for Thursday, November 20th. Housing Coordinator Kimberly Fish was out of the office and unavailable for comment. The next headline in the Falmouth Enterprise of today, Friday, November 7th, Officials to Revisit Options for Police Station Site by Lynn Hutchinson. The Select Board is scheduled to hear recommendations for alternative locations to house a new police station at a special meeting that's planned for Thursday, November 13th. For months, the Police Station Advisory Committee has attempted to garner support from the board and community for its recommended site at 44 Brickkiln Road. Concerns of site impact on Long Pond has stalled the decision as no fallback options were offered. Following 2 public forums and 2 Select Board meetings, which were all met with growing calls to protect the town's main drinking water sources and establish land restrictions around Long Pond, Town Manager Michael Renshaw has instructed the Advisory Committee to reevaluate locations that were previously passed up. One location being reevaluated is 100 Brickkiln Road. The town purchased the 23.7-acre parcel from the Augusta family in 2003. Renshaw shared with the board Monday, November 3rd, that Town Council will be providing a legal lens to the site, as there may be deed restrictions from the Title 97 designation. Article 97 refers to state protection for land designated as open or recreational space. While we're still vetting, we feel like there may be a pathway forward, Renshaw said about 100 Brickkiln Road. The site was initially not recommended by the Advisory Committee, which cited anticipated challenges with sewer easements, deed restrictions, access issues, and the Article 97 designation. Another location the Advisory Committee will be evaluating, which was not previously examined, is a 12.3-acre site located adjacent to the Hatchville Fire Station at 888 Sandwich Road. Of the total acreage, 5 are developable, Renshaw told the board. However, like many sites that were vetted to make the initial recommendation, 888 Sandwich Road may have significant Article 97 restrictions, Renshaw noted. During an October 28th community outreach forum, Assistant Town Manager Peter K. Johnson-Staub explained that in order to develop land that has an Article 97 designation, it would require state approval. A submission of alternative analysis to the Mass Department of Energy and Environmental Affairs would be required, and a replacement of lost land would need to be identified and dedicated under Article 97. The matter would require a two-thirds roll call vote of the state legislature. Town meeting would have to authorize the town to petition the legislature. Johnson-Staub said the relief process could take at least a year, and it's uncertain if approval would be granted. If the project's delayed by 1 year as a result of an attempt to lift Article 97, there may be an additional $2 million added to the project cost, Johnson-Staub said. Town meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 17th, where members will be asked to approve funds for engineering and design of the new station. The Select Board plans to convene a meeting on Thursday, November 13th at 5 p.m. at the Senior Center to review additional sites. My hope is that we can provide enough information with regard to these additional sites and rank order these optional sites so the Select Board can feel comfortable making a decision based on those recommendations, Renshaw said. Traffic concerns take center stage as Planning Board hears a Wendy's proposal by Katie Nelson. Concerns over traffic at Worcester Court and Spring Bars Road dominated the Planning Board debate on a proposed Wendy's restaurant Tuesday on November 4th. Attorney Robert Ament of Ament Clower LLP presented the Wendy's proposal to the Planning Board, outlining plans for a 2,819 square foot restaurant with an outdoor patio, 36 indoor seats, and 39 parking spaces. The vacant lot, where the fast food restaurant's planned, sits at the corner of Worcester Court and Spring Bars Road, across from Service Credit Union and behind Cappy's liquor store in the center of Falmouth's B2 business district. Designs show the proposed building would cover 6.9% of the roughly 1 acre lot and features 2 driveways, one of which onto Spring Bars Road would exclusively be an exit only. The other driveway, which already exists on the lot, will remain. The land is owned by Susan K. Mueller, who has owned the lot for over 40 years. The site was formerly home to a car wash. The project went to the Planning Board for a site plan review and special permit requests to allow parking in the front yard of the property and to allow parking 2 feet from the property line. This is not the first time the project has come before a town board. In August of 2020, the Select Board reviewed the project and granted a variance to the town's sewer flow neutral bylaw, allowing Wendy's a 1,000 gallon per day sewer allocation for the restaurant. Under the bylaw, the restaurant was only permitted 451 gallons per day. During this week's presentation, Josh Levine, CFO of Fashion Foods, addressed the board to say, "We are not Wendy's corporate." Levine said the employees who work for Fashion Foods-owned Wendy's locations live and work in their communities on Cape Cod. Fashion Foods, LLC, co-owned by Terry Smiley and Usama El-Shahare, is a franchise of Wendy's. Fashion Foods also owns the Wendy's locations in Mashpee, Yarmouth, and Plymouth. Randall Hart of Vanas Hangen Brucelin, VHB, presented a summary of an over 300-page traffic report. Hart explained the study was conducted in August of 2024. Wendy's and other fast food restaurants with drive-through service rely on pass-by traffic, Hart said. The location at Worcester Court is not a very busy roadway, Hart said, especially compared to other fast food locations on Route 28. The driveway on Spring Bars Road is located on a hill, but Hart said sightlines are appropriate for the location. As for the drive-through, the line will have room for a maximum of 15 cars. Planning Board member Paul Dreyer said traffic was one of his biggest concerns. He commended the extensive traffic report, but said he felt a stoplight might be an appropriate safety measure at the intersection. Hart said it's unlikely that the property could attain a signal warrant, which is a set of criteria that would warrant the necessity of the traffic light, such as a high traffic volume, which Hart said the intersection would likely not meet. Obtaining such a warrant is also expensive, between $300,000 and $550,000, Hart said. Vice Chairwoman Patricia H. Kerfoot said she recently saw an accident at the intersection and suggested installing blinking stop signs, like the signs on Dillingham Avenue and at the other end of Spring Bars Road at the Mara Vista Avenue intersection. Kerfoot said she thought the blinking yellow light installed over the intersection last year at the intersection is too high for drivers to see. Hart explained the signal's high so large delivery trucks can pass underneath it. Charlotte Harris, another member of the board, asked if the developers might consider changing the design to match the aesthetic of the town. Smiley said Fashion Foods is open to considering an alternative design. He said the Wendy's location in Yarmouth was designed to match the Cape Cod look. Residents in the audience who spoke at the meeting all mentioned traffic. Richard Stone, who lives off Mara Vista Avenue, said Spring Bars Road is a cut-through road, and cars frequently speed down the road. He added that traffic from Aldi exiting the plaza from the back onto Worcester Court has exacerbated the issue. Benjamin Garvin, a Worcester Court resident, noted that surrounding businesses such as Clement's Auto Service and FW Web Company and the Service Credit Union Bank all close early in the evening. Garvin wondered what the hours of operations would be at the proposed Wendy's. He said he felt the location was a weird spot for a Wendy's. Scott Clement, owner of the neighboring auto shop, said he worried about the hours of operation too. He said he worried that late-night customers might try to sneak onto his property or leave litter. He pointed out that the traffic study was completed before Aldi was open for business. Clerk of the Planning Board, Thomas Zine, read 4 letters of opposition into the record, mostly reiterating traffic concerns. A letter from the Service Credit Union's corporate office asked the developers consider making the exit-only driveway onto Spring Bars Road a right-turn-only exit. The letter indicated safety concerns for customers leaving the bank, for cars and pedestrians. Next, Muller asked to speak. She said she and her late husband considered what would go on the lot very carefully and chose Fashion Foods because of the positive community impact the businesses have demonstrated in other towns. That lot is our legacy, she said. Muller said she heard and understood resident concerns about traffic, but added that the issue was not with a business going on her lot. The issue is with the intersection. If you think saying no to Wendy's is going to prevent accidents, you're dead wrong, she said. There were 3 letters of support included in the Planning Board's meeting packet. Muller asked why those letters were not read into the record, as the letters of opposition had been. Zine read the letters from Duffy Health Center and Mashpee residents Daniel Rodrigues and Melissa Hallett. All 3 letters said owners Smiley and El Shaharawi have been committed community partners. Hallett wrote that the Wendy's location in Mashpee has provided employment opportunities for Mashpee students and has shown dedication to being a good neighbor. Rodrigues said that the Mashpee store has allowed Girl Scout troops to sell cookies outside their restaurant and has shown commitment to operating and investing locally. The Planning Board voted to continue the site plan review and special permit hearing to Tuesday, December 9th. In the interim, the developers will work to address comments from the town's engineering department, including comments regarding drainage, parking, and stormwater runoff. Model boat enthusiast finds community, craft, and connection in Woods Hole by Katie Nelson. Spending hours toiling to create a model may seem like an isolating activity to a novice. However, Edward Teeler III has found collaboration, artistry, and connection through the hobby, most recently in Woods Hole. Teeler and his family have lived up and down the East Coast. For the 63 years the pair has been married, Teeler and his wife, Helen, have made homes in Maryland, New Jersey, and even aboard a boat for 4 years. The models Teeler creates reflects the places he has lived and the communities he's gotten to know and contribute to. I've never built the same kind of boat twice, Teeler told the Enterprise during a visit this week to his apartment at Atria Woodbriar Place. In his apartment at Atria, Teeler had created a mini version of a woodworking workshop. Pliers, tongs, magnifying glasses, lighting, and a box of tools are organized and ready for use by his computer desk, where he spends time researching his projects. I thank God for the internet, Teeler said. Appreciation for creativity and craftsmanship was passed down through the generations in his family, Thieler said. Before he retired from his position as an orthopedic surgeon, watercolor paintings done by his mother hung on the walls of his medical office. In 2022, Thieler found his way to the Woods Hole Historical Museum's community boat shop, where he built intergenerational relationships as well as boats. The first winter, Thieler worked in the shop with John J. Jake Frick, Charles M. Verbeck, and then Falmouth High School student Peter F. Tribby. The result was a wooden shellback dinghy and 3 new friends. Now about 12 people come to build together at the workshop every week. The younger folks in the workshop do the heavy lifting, while 88-year-old Thieler says he sticks to the models. "I just have had a ball," Thieler said. "I found a home. I found a shop." In addition to building the physical models, which he does at a 1-inch to 1-foot scale, Thieler conducts extensive research on his builds for historical accuracy. Before coming to Falmouth to live full-time, Thieler had his work displayed in museums such as the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. Thieler said each coastal community constructed their own style of boat to perform their region-specific work. In Chesapeake Bay, Thieler built work vessels called skipjacks, designed for dredging oysters and crabbing. One of his early skipjack models, named the Helen T, after his wife, was only the first in a series of about 30 model boats the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum has had in its collection. Thieler put his research, restoration, and curation skills to work at the Woods Hole Historical Museum, where he saw an opportunity to improve the conditions of the model boats on display. That also gave Thieler an opportunity to work with new styles of boat models. "The models were a mess," Thieler said. "Models weren't in proper cases and weren't accompanied by accession information." Thieler said the wooden models were exposed to seasonal temperature changes and humidity, and they were covered in dust and cobwebs. Since finding his home at the Woods Hole Historical Museum Maritime Workshop, Thieler has constructed displays, cases, and plinths for the models and other museum artifacts. He's restored unique models, such as an authentic 1950s Inuit kayak, made with historically accurate materials including sealskin and walrus tusks. Thieler called the model one of the best that exists. In Falmouth, Thieler has found the people and the resources he needs to keep his mind and his hands active. The next headline on the front page of today's Falmouth Enterprise, dated Friday, November 7th. Falmouth considers tax relief for full-time residents, by Lynn Hutchinson. A growing number of Cape towns have adopted or are in the process of adopting residential tax exemptions for year-round residents. This taxing option was enacted in 1979. Falmouth is now weighing the idea as the town looks for ways to offset rising property values and tax burdens on people who live in town full-time in lower and moderately priced homes. The exemption reduces the taxable value of a homeowner's primary residence by no more than 35% of the average residential property value in that town. Only residents who declare their Falmouth home as their primary residence would qualify. Seasonal homeowners and landlords who don't occupy their property as their main residence are not eligible. Commercial property would not be impacted or considered in this framework. The exemption would not reduce the total tax revenue that the town collects. To accommodate a decrease in total residential tax base, an increase in residential tax would be required for higher valued homes. As of December of 2024, there are 22,000. Sorry, this must be wrong. There's a misprint here. As of December 2024, there are 22,263 or 22,630 something. The number is 22,63. So either 2,263 residential properties in town or 22,630 something residential properties in town. The average assessed value of residential property is $904,996. According to Finance Director Laura L. Citron of Falmouth, the town currently has no idea how many of those properties are occupied by year-round residents. If the town adopted a 10% residential exemption, each qualifying homeowner would see their home's taxable value reduced by 10% of the average, or about $90,500. To maintain total revenue, the residential tax rate would rise from $5.87 to roughly $6.27 per $1,000 of the property value. Since the town has not yet determined how many homes would qualify, Citron modeled an example assuming 70% eligibility for the Select Board. Under that scenario, a home valued below $1,418,580.20 would see a decrease in its annual property tax bill, while properties valued above that amount would see an increase. The $1,418,580.20 represents the break-even point where the reduced valuation and higher tax rate offset each other. The lower a property is valued, the greater the benefits of the exemption. For instance, a year-round homeowner with a property valued at $100,000 would see an annual tax bill drop of about $527, while another year-round homeowner with a property valued at $2.96 million would see an increase of about $615. The 46-year-old state law is designed to shift a portion of the residential tax burden away from lower and moderately valued primary residences and toward higher valued seasonal and investment properties. Select Board Chairman Robert Muscali expressed support for moving forward with an exemption, saying, "We, meaning the town, need to be defined by who can afford to live here, and not necessarily who can come here for a month or for a week." If the town decides to approve a residential exemption, significant administrative preparation would be required, Citron said. In order to ensure tax revenue is neutral, all eligible residents would have to apply before the tax rate is set, as late applications could cause lost revenue for the town. There needs to be significant marketing, Citron said. The earliest the exemption could take effect would be fiscal year 2028, with tax rates set in December of 2027. And to prepare, the town would need to budget staff and resources in fiscal year 27, which will be proposed this December. This agenda item was for discussion only, so no formal decision was made. And the final story on the front page of today's Falmouth Enterprise, Falmouth eyes tax surcharge for wastewater upgrades by Lynn Hutchinson. The town's wastewater management projects designed to improve water quality in the town's waterways are costly. The future ocean outfall project is estimated to cost $91 million, while $60 million was appropriated at the April 2025 town meeting for the Great Pond Phase 1 sewer project. Continued efforts to improve the town's water quality will continue to cost taxpayers and will have to be considered among other town demands. Wastewater Superintendent Amy A. Lowell made a pitch to the Select Board Monday night, November 3rd, to establish a Water Infrastructure Improvement Fund, a WIIF, that would provide a reliable source of funding for wastewater management projects. The funds for a WIIF would be established through a property tax surcharge of up to 3%. The amount generated would not be subject to the levy limitations of Proposition 2.5, which established the amount of property tax revenue the town can raise through real and personal property taxes. The revenue collected would only be used for the purpose of maintenance, improvement, and investment for municipal wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater infrastructure. The town cannot afford to implement all of these wastewater management and other capital improvement projects with existing revenue sources, Lowell told the Select Board. Setting up a WIIF will provide a consistent source of funding and leave more funds available for other town priorities. Other town capital projects include the estimated $65 million new police station, $150 million renovation of the Lawrence School in fiscal year 28, and $21.7 million for new town vehicles and emergency services equipment. Previous wastewater management projects have been funded through borrowing. Currently, Lowell anticipates that debt service costs for wastewater projects could average between $3 and $7 million per year from 2030 to 2050 and beyond. However, those estimates are preliminary and subject to change, she said, as estimates depend on when projects are approved to begin and the types of financing. Article 3 at the November 17 town meeting calls for funding a watershed management plan that would provide more clarity on the town's 20-year wastewater project schedule and costs for all state-designated nitrogen-sensitive areas. The current funding process is not the most reliable when compared to having a fund designated for wastewater management-specific projects, Lowell said. The creation of the WIFF and the surcharge rate would need approval from town meeting, followed by approval from voters at the ballot. Neighboring towns, including Mashpee and Sandwich, have established WIIFs with a 2% property tax surcharge. While not a formal recommendation, as the matter is for discussion purposes only, Lowell suggested a 3% surcharge in Falmouth. Lowell explained that all property, commercial and residential, would be taxed if such a fund were approved. The WIIF would last until the town decided to dissolve the fund. Select Board Vice Chairwoman Heather Goldstone and Select Board member Colin Reed noted the importance of not only considering the benefits of the WIIF to town capital needs, but the tax implications the fund could have on residents. Lowell recommended that it be included on the April 2026 town meeting warrant, which would require a recommendation from the Select Board this December or early January. No vote was taken, as the agenda item was for discussion purposes only. We are a few minutes past the midway portion of our reading, and regular listeners are aware it's at that stage that we move to a different kind of local news, which are the obituaries, death notices, and memorials listed in that day's Falmouth Enterprise. And the first obituary in the Falmouth Enterprise of Friday, November 7th of 2025 is of Susan Rosenberg of Falmouth, who passed at the age of 81 on October 24th. She was an educator of young children and was known for her holistic education that employed strategies built on human relations. She leaves her husband of 61 years, Arnold Rosenberg, and many family and friends. A burial was held October 27th at the Falmouth Jewish Cemetery. The next obituary is of Louis S. Seabalk of East Falmouth, who passed at the age of 98 on October 28th. He was born in Budapest, Hungary, and attended the Technical University of Budapest, earning a mechanical engineering diploma. It was an assistant professor when the Hungarian Revolution broke out in 1956. Active in the community, he was a Boy Scout leader, president of the Great Harbors Neighborhood Association, a trustee of the Marion Bermuda Race, and commodore of both the Blue Water Sailing Club and the Moody Boat Owners Association. He leaves his wife and many family and friends. A celebration of his life will be held next summer. The next obituary is of Michael Mattia, Jr., of Falmouth, who died on October 25th at the age of 70. As a chef, he owned and operated Michael's, an Italian restaurant in Mashpee, for 10 years. He leaves his wife, Mary Mattia, and many family and friends. No formal services will be held. A celebration of life will take place at the Cape Cod Winery in spring of 2026. The next obituary is of James P. Champani of Medford, formerly of Falmouth, who passed at the age of 46 on October 29th. Following high school, he went on to pursue a career as a tradesman. He worked as a journeyman electrician and was a proud member of the IBEW 103 since 2005. Visiting hours will be held Sunday, November 9th from noon to 4 p.m. at Chapman Funerals and Cremations in Mashpee. A funeral mass will be celebrated Monday, November 10th at 11 a.m. at St. Bridget of Kildare Parish in South Boston. Burial will immediately follow at Oak Grove Cemetery in Medford. The next is a memorial of Mary Lou Gray, who departed this life surrounded by family on October 31st after a brief illness. She was born May 19th, 1943. You can visit the Fagan Quinn Funeral Home for a complete obituary and condolences. No services are listed. The other memorial is of a veteran, Thomas B. Wheeler, lovingly known as Poppy to his family, who passed on November 4th of this year at age 89. Born in 1936, Tom lived a life marked by his extraordinary character and deep devotion to his family. He's survived by his beloved wife of 65 years, Robin, and many family and friends. After graduating from Yale in 1958, Tom proudly served his country in the U.S. Navy. Mr. Wheeler, thank you for your service. A celebration of life will be held in the spring. The following residents, former residents, or family of residents of Bourne, Mashpee, and Sandwich recently died. Michael T. Burgess, 77, died October 30th. Walter J. Jaworski, Jr., 94, of Pocasset, died November 5th. And Scott K. Kempton, 68, of Bourne, died November 1st. And that concludes the obituaries, death notices, and memorials listed in the Falmouth Enterprise of Friday, November 7th. Moving to the front of the paper into the news section, Health Board will ask Select Board to explore fair financial support for septic upgrades, by Katie Nelson. The Board of Health this week discussed how the town can take action to address financial fairness for septic and sewer upgrades mandated by the town. They voted to support sending a letter to the Select Board suggesting the board form a body, such as a committee or a task force, to begin to tackle the issue of equitable cost distribution for state and town-mandated wastewater improvements. Monday's discussion and vote was prompted by a visit from Stephen B. Layton, vice chairman of the Water Quality Management Committee, who said he was there not as a member of that committee but as a private citizen. The Board of Health recently passed an updated septic regulation, which requires septic upgrades to innovative alternative, IA, septic systems for any new construction or increases in septic flow in nitrogen-regulated areas. The update in the regulation was written in response to the Mass Department of Environmental Protection's mandate that the town reduce its nitrogen loading. My goal is to determine who else is interested in pursuing financial fairness, Layton told the board. Layton went on to say there's no individual benefit for homeowners who upgrade their septic systems or connect to the municipal sewer, aside from the philanthropic benefit of improving water quality for the whole town. Dr. George P. Topoulos, a member of the Health Board, said Falmouth homeowners will fall into one of three categories if their property is in a nitrogen-sensitive regulated area. Neighbor A, he said, pays for connection to the sewer and associated costs, including betterments. Neighbor B, if their current septic fails or if they have new construction on site, will pay to remove their existing septic system, install and operate an IA septic system. And neighbor C owns a home with a functioning septic system that's not inside a nitrogen-regulated area and will not incur additional expenses. All three neighbors will get the same benefit of improved water quality, but have significantly differing financial burdens, Topoulos said. Topoulos and Layton agreed that the town should be looking into ways to support residents to make the state-mandated wastewater management improvements more affordable. Topoulos added that costs associated with the Ocean Outfall project, sewer system expansion, IA installations, and everything involved in the watershed plans should be considered in the discussion of fairly distributing the financial burden that the town will incur over the next 20 years. Chairman of the Board of Health, Kevin Kroger, said the subject of financial support is not within the Board of Health's purview. Amy A. Roth, a member of the committee, made the suggestion that the Board of Health should ask the Select Board to form a body to tackle the issue. She said that body could be charged with developing a plan to address the fair distribution of costs in relation to the watershed management plans, including the ocean outfall, sewer expansion, and IAs. Kroger was charged with writing the letter. Also from the news section, county and towns are poised to take their next steps on regional composting facility, by Lynn Hutchinson. Barnstable County and the four Upper Cape towns are set to take the next steps towards establishing a regional composting facility at Joint Base Cape Cod, which would allow local food waste to be composted on site and reduce the time, cost, and logistics of transporting it to an off-Cape composting facility. Following the completion of a feasibility study earlier this year, the county and its partnering towns, Falmouth, Bourne, Mashpee, and Sandwich, will now look to move forward with permitting. site acquisitions, and engineering for the proposed facility. They'll also begin developing an intermunicipal agreement with Joint Base Cape Cod. The Cape Cod Coastal Community Composting Project, led by Barnstable County, is part of a broader effort to reduce waste disposal costs by keeping organic material on Cape Cod. A feasibility study by SCS engineers commissioned by the county found that food scraps and organic waste currently make up about 36% of the region's waste stream, much of which is being shipped off Cape. The facility would serve the Upper Cape towns and the base itself, processing 5,000 tons of food waste and 7,000 tons of wood chips or leaves annually to create compost for municipal and retail use. The next steps would be for the 4 towns to contribute $7,500 each to help cover additional engineering and legal fees associated with parcel divestment, County Administrator Michael Dutton said at the Falmouth Solid Waste Committee meeting on Tuesday, November 4th. The remaining costs of this phase would be picked up by the county. If all goes as planned, officials anticipate an 18 to 24-month permitting and design process, followed by about 6 months of construction. It could take roughly 2.5 years and an estimated $3 million before the facility could be used. After a year of operation, the county will evaluate the program's success to determine whether to expand the facility to serve additional Cape communities, said Carrie L. Parcell, Municipal Assistance Coordinator with Barnstable County's Cape Cod Cooperative Extension and the Mass DEP. Interest in developing a local composting facility first emerged in 2020, when a study found that roughly 25% of the Cape's waste stream consisted of food scraps. In November of 2022, the Massachusetts DEP cut the commercial food waste disposal limit in half, from 1 ton per week to just half a ton. The stricter regulation means that many restaurants, schools, and institutions that were previously exempt are now required to divert their food waste from the trash stream. For now, the project is focused on the base and the 4 Upper Cape towns. Both Dutton and Parcell shared that other communities have expressed interest in participating, but the focus is on the Upper Cape. While many details still need to be considered, officials are optimistic. We've made great progress. Sometimes progress isn't measured in how many documents you have stacked up, but in our case, progress has been measured by the buy-in from the towns, and more importantly, the buy-in of Joint Base Cape Cod. In February, retired Brigadier General Christopher Foe, Executive Director of Joint Base Cape Cod, affirmed the base's commitment to hosting the regional composting facility. While no parcel has been formally selected, the military has identified 2 potential sites on the base. The preferred location sits adjacent to the former landfill, and an alternative site just south of the preferred location, east of Generals Boulevard. From the Falmouth Enterprise editorial board, holding on to the past won't secure the town's future. A trio of warrant articles coming before town meeting this month could determine whether the town accepts and leases the former Cape Cod Country Club for solar use or excludes the property from its solar zoning district altogether. Articles 12 and 13 would allow the town to take ownership of the site and lease it for solar development, while Article 14, a citizen's petition, seeks to block that plan. For nearly a century, the country club has been part of the Hatchville landscape, where generations have learned to play golf on fairways overlooking Coonamessett Pond. The affection for this course is understandable, and those working to save it deserve credit for their passion and commitment. But as difficult as it is to say, preserving the Cape Cod Country Club as a golf course, or even as open space, is no longer a realistic option. The owners have kept it running for 40 years, often at a loss, and no buyer has stepped forward to purchase and maintain it as a golf course. And while the idea of preserving the land as open space has undeniable appeal, that would require a dramatic turn of events. Right now, the seller is locked into a purchase and sale agreement with the solar company. It's unclear whether there's any legal way out of that contract, even if the seller wanted to explore another path. Assembling the financing and preservation package needed to purchase and protect the land would also be a huge and complicated undertaking. Even if such a plan could be developed, it would require coordination, funding, and time, none of which currently exist. So far, the conversations around halting the solar project have been scattershot, a collection of loose ideas rather than a coherent strategy, and no one appears to be working together toward a feasible solution. And if Article 14 passes, then what? Zoning alone doesn't preserve land, it simply limits what can be built under current rules. Perhaps complicating matters even further, the Planning Board last week voted unanimously to endorse an approval not required perimeter plan for the site, known as an ANR, which the lead project developer for the solar farm said preserves the property's zoning designation. What effect that vote will have on the town meeting vote remains unclear. But no matter, even if the overlay zoning is peeled back, the property would still be privately owned, and another development proposal could easily follow. The risk is that in stopping one project without a realistic alternative, the town invites a far less desirable outcome down the road. Additionally, Massachusetts is committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The state's decarbonization roadmap, released in 2020, makes clear the scale of that challenge. Reaching net zero requires 27 gigawatts of new solar capacity, enough panels to cover 158,000 acres, or about 3% of the state's land area. So far, we've installed barely a fifth of that. To get the rest, we'll need to find places for solar that don't come at the expense of forests, farmland, or protected wildlife habitat. That's what makes the Cape Cod Country Club proposal so significant. Unlike much of the large-scale solar development in the state, which has too often meant clearing trees or displacing productive farmland, this site is already cleared and managed. The Mass Audubon Harvard Forest study on solar siting identified golf courses as among the most suitable lands for new solar, precisely because they minimize those trade-offs. If Article 14 succeeds and the solar project fails, the likely alternative is not the return of golf, but a large-scale housing development. And such a development would bring far greater change to the landscape and to the health of Coonamessett Pond than solar panels ever could. The proposed solar project will generate clean, local energy, reduce fertilizer runoff into the pond, and set aside more than 50 acres for permanent conservation. And that's just for starters. When the solar lease ends, ownership of the entire 137-acre property will transfer to the town. No, it's not perfect. Few big projects are. But it's responsible, forward-looking, and environmentally sound. And in the case of the state's energy future, it's also necessary. We can relate to those who will miss the fairways and the memories tied to them, but sentiment can't outweigh long-term responsibility. The solar plan offers a new purpose for the land, one that serves the wider community well into the future. Our next headline, Town awards $1.5 million for 4 Sandwich Road Affordable Housing Project by Lynn Hutchinson. Affordable housing in the same lot as Dunkin' Donuts at 4 Sandwich Road is one step closer to being a reality as the developer this week secured $1.5 million from the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. The plan calls for 10 deed-restricted affordable rental units for households earning between 80 and 120% of the area median income in perpetuity. With the town's $1.5 million commitment, project manager Michael Galasso said he now plans to pursue additional state financing to make the apartments even more affordable. As it's currently proposed, 2 units would be restricted to 80% AMI, another 2 to 100% AMI, and the remaining 6 to 120% AMI. This would place monthly rents between approximately $2,200 and $3,420. To me, that isn't really affordable, Galasso told the Select Board on Monday evening, November 3rd. He said the town's contribution could help the development qualify for additional state grants, funding he hopes to apply for in December, which could reduce rent further. Currently, only 4 of the 18 units would qualify for the town's subsidized housing inventory known as SHI. However, Galasso said that if the project receives roughly $2 million in state grants, the deed restriction could be lowered for the remaining units to at least 100% AMI, which would qualify the 6 units to count toward the SHI list. When asked by Selectman Jack Richardson whether the project would move forward as planned if state funding is not approved, Galasso said the easy answer would be yes, but that he doesn't usually take the easy route, committing to find alternative funding opportunities. I really don't want to build a project and end up having rents that are going to possibly compete with market rate houses, Galasso said. Recent design changes for the 5 duplexes include new roof angles to accommodate solar panels, making half of the units accessible, and removing a proposed play area. According to Galasso, the town's zoning board of appeals determined that the nearby field at the school administration building provides sufficient recreation space. The Select Board, acting as trustees of the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund, voted on Monday to award the $1.5 million as a loan, secured by a mortgage for the construction of the 10 deed-restricted units. Although the award is structured as a loan, the developer will not be required to repay the town so long as the project is constructed and operated in compliance with affordability, as agreed upon between the town and the developer. Since there wasn't an agenda for the Select Board meeting next Thursday, on Thursday of next week, the Select Board briefs may be more important than usual to read. We always try to read it. Select Board briefs, committee updates, budget policy, and capital project tracker by Lynn Hutchinson. Across the town's public libraries, programming and services continue to grow, making the libraries more than just a book repository space. In an update to the Select Board, Board of Library Trustees Chairwoman Judith L. Fenwick highlighted how the Falmouth Public Library continues to serve as a cultural and community hub, with a lawn frequently being requested for events such as Summer Movies Under the Stars, Arts Alive, the College Light Opera, and Revolution Lanterns and Lyrics. The Friends of the Falmouth Public Library held its annual 5-day book sale on the grounds this year in July, featuring more than 50,000 books and raising approximately $80,000 to support library programs. Fenwick noted an expansion in programs offered at the libraries. In the past year alone, Falmouth Public Library hosted 302 adult programs with more than 4,200 attendees and 132 young adult programs drawing more than 2,100 participants. That's a group we're not used to having in the library in the numbers that we now are, Fenwick said about the young adult population. The board has also prioritized staff development, tripling professional training funds over the past 3 years, and has upgraded public access technology with 12 new desktop computers at the main library and 2 at the East Falmouth branch. Library Director Brian Stokes reported that in fiscal year 2025, visits across the library's 3 locations increased by 10%, totaling around 200,000 visits. Materials circulation rose by 5%, with more than 500,000 checkouts. Libraries are spaces that are not necessarily being thought of as book repository spaces as maybe they were historically, Stokes said. In 2025, there are many communities choosing not to support these institutions, but here, it's more vital than it's ever been. The next note. Agricultural Commission Chairman Stanwood Ingram began his annual report noting a poor cranberry harvest this year, despite keeping up with maintenance and care of the cranberry bogs. Another major concern for the Commission is the loss of viable farmland, which Ingram described as happening at an alarming rate, largely due to development pressure. To help even the playing field and make agricultural land more accessible to local farming efforts, Ingram suggested that revenue from the county's proposed luxury tax, currently intended for affordable housing, be shared with the Commission to establish a farmland preservation fund. Ingram said the Commission has begun working with the 300 Committee Land Trust and Farming Falmouth to explore long-term strategies for protecting farmland. It's also partnered with Farming Falmouth to hold a conservation restriction on a 6-acre farm recently purchased by the nonprofit. The Commission will monitor the restriction annually, Ingram told the Select Board. Select Board Vice Chairwoman Heather Goldstone suggested the Commission continue discussions in collaboration with the 300 Committee Land Trust and Farming Falmouth to protect farming land and create community garden opportunities. She also proposed the Commission consider opportunities to partner with the town's Cultural Council to find ways to not only have farms be a place of food production, but be venues for educational, cultural, arts kinds of events to help raise the profile that farms are playing in the town. The next note. The Select Board has approved the operating budget policy for fiscal year 2027, which outlines the strategies, financial policies, and goals that will guide the development of the upcoming year's operating budget. The policy provides direction to staff in preparing the town manager's recommended FY27 budget. It emphasizes the use of conservative revenue projections. It accounts for potential financial and economic challenges that could affect town operations and excludes the use of Proposition 2.5 overrides. The policy also includes guidance on maintaining and managing reserve funds. Finance Director Laura L. Citrin pointed out financial challenges the town may experience during fiscal year 27. Among those challenges are anticipated increase in health insurance premium for active and retired town employees, national and local inflation rates impact on salaries and operating costs, lower interest impact on cash and investments revenue, national policies impacting funding sources for transportation, housing, education, and social programs, and the requirement by the state to pay off the long-term debt of the town's retirement plan system. In anticipation of future challenges and the town's financial limitation, board members and the town manager emphasized the need for creativity and considered regional approaches to address the town's growing needs. In an effort to track the status of capital projects and the goals within the town's strategic plan, ClearPoint Strategy has been commissioned to assist with providing a software platform. Town Manager Michael Renshaw updated the board about the partnership, which started in April of 2024. The town is in its final phase of the build-out as departments are entering their data. The goal of the program, Renshaw said, is to provide the Select Board with quarterly updates on various capital projects and goals. The next phase of the project is establishing a public-facing dashboard for the community. Estimated launch of the platform is spring of 2026, Renshaw said. The board briefly discussed the town of Brewster's preschool family support pilot program and how such a program could be reproduced in town. Brewster's pilot program began in May of 2024, providing financial support to about 70 families. Families with children received up to $3,000. Discussion of the topic was brought up by the chairman, Robert P. Mascali, for the board to consider other ways the town can address affordability issues. And finally, Cape Cod Winery was approved for a special one-day agricultural liquor license. The board approved the Falmouth Theater Guild for 2 special one-day all-alcoholic beverages licenses for 2 weekends in December. The date for West Falmouth Library's special one-day wine and malt beverages license was changed from October 29th to Wednesday, November 12th. The Falmouth Cultural Council has been given the go-ahead to apply to the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod for a $5,000 grant and to the Rotary Club of Falmouth, Cape Cod for a $1,000 grant. Highfield Hall and Gardens was approved for a sign variance. A holiday sign will be placed at the corner of Depot Avenue and North Main Street for an annual Holiday at Highfield. And with that, we've come to the end of our reading of the Falmouth Enterprise for today, Friday, November 7th of 2025. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other. And remember our veterans. If you missed any of the information in our readings, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org, our fully disability-compliant website. Click on the Listen tab, and you'll find 150 chronologically listed readings by us under All Reads to the Blind. We also keep a wide variety of periodicals and literature up there, as well as radio plays and our shopping guides. Bye for now.